Today we will look at a GW2 Reaper Open World build that melts enemies in seconds while giving you a very good amount of sustain. You will be able to do everything you want in Open World with this build without any problems. Whether it is to progress your story or unlock some masteries or work on achievements and collections. And of course the build will also work very well in things like meta events, hero points and bounties. So whatever you want to do in Open World, this build will work very well for you. For the traits we have Soul Reaping 1, 2, and then this magic 2, 3, 2, and Reaper 2, 2, 3. For the utility skills, your soul is mine for the heals, and then Signet of the Locust with Rise and Spectral Grasp, and then your elite is Chill to the Bone. Now let's explain in details how this build will work. Reaper Shroud is your main source of damage and sustain, and so being in Shroud is the most important thing, even if you will just auto-attack. Pretty much all the traits in Soul Reaping will make your Reaper Shroud even stronger. Unyielding Blast will make each one of your auto-attack chains applies 2 stacks of vulnerability on the enemies, which means you will have no problem stacking 25 stacks of them, and that will mean 25% more damage. And then Soul Barbs will give you this effect on your bar, which will increase your damage by 10% for 15 seconds every time you go in and out of Shroud. And because we are going to do that very often in the fight, since Reaper Shroud is your main thing, this is pretty much going to be a permanent buff you will have. This Perception will increase your critical chance by 15%, and on top of that, when you are in Shroud, this will increase your critical damage by 15%. This will also work very well with the Grandmaster trait in Reaper, which will increase your ferocity by 300 also when you are in Shroud. 300 ferocity is basically 20% more critical damage. So just from those 2 traits alone, you are going to be doing 35% more critical damage when you are in Reaper Shroud. And on top of that, from this same trait, you are going to also apply quickness permanently as long as you are in Shroud. Even the minor traits in Soul Reaping will help you with Reaper Shroud. Gluttony will increase the amount of life force you will gain from all sources by 10%, so it will help you fill your bar faster. Sinister Shroud will reduce all the cooldowns on all your Reaper Shroud skills by 15%. This will also work very well with the Grandmaster trait in Reaper, because from this trait, your last chain in your auto attack will reduce your cooldown of your Reaper Shroud skills by 1 second, and this will add up very quickly. And then Soul Battery will increase your maximum life force by 20%, which means basically more life force, and you will be able to stay in your Reaper Shroud for longer. And then in the Reaper trait line, we have Chilling Nova, Chilling Victory, and Cold Shoulder. All 3 of them will work together very well and they will increase your damage. And all 3 of them will depend on chills. From Chilling Nova, if you did a critical hit to your enemy and they had chills, you will spread that chill to the enemies surrounding them. And then from Chilling Victory, you will get life force and might when you hit chilled enemies. Especially if you have multiple enemies surrounding you, for example, and you hit them with something like Soul Spiral while you have chilling, you will get a ton of might and life force just from that. Cold Shoulder will increase the damage you do to enemies that have chilling by 15%. And it will also increase the duration on chilling on them by 20%, so it will enable you to get that buff even more. Reaper Shroud is not only very good for damage, it's also good for sustain. Because as soon as you enter Reaper Shroud, the damage you take will be reduced by 33%, which is significant. And then in Shroud itself, you can use your skill number 3 once, basically infusing terror, and this will get you another buff that will reduce the damage you take by 66%. So just going to Shroud and using skill number 3 infusing terror at least once, this is going to give you massive damage reduction. We get a lot more sustain from this magic, and this heavily relies on an effect called Carapace. This effect will give you 20 toughness per stack, and it can stack up to 30 times. And it's not that hard at all to get the maximum 30 stacks. So basically means you will very often in the fight end up with 30 stacks of Carapace, which basically means 600 toughness. And then from the Grandmaster trait, this will give you 1 stack of that effect every time you apply conditions on the enemies. And although you may think that this is a power build and you will not do that much condition damage, but remember that you will be doing a lot of vulnerability and a lot of chills, and you will also be doing a lot of poison. So you will easily get a lot of stacks from that effect as you play your build normally. And then on top of that, when you have 25 stacks of Carapace or more, you will get protection every second. And so, you get protection from this trait, which reduces damage by 33%. And then when you are in Reaper Shroud, your damage is reduced by another 33%. And in Shroud itself, when you use your skill number 3, this will reduce the damage by another 66%. So all the sources of Carapace from this trait are You get 5 stacks when you enter Shroud, so just by entering Shroud, you will get some of them. And from this trait, you will get 1 stack of the Carapace effect when you apply poison on the enemies. And so again, from skill like Soul Spiral, for example, you will end up getting tons of stacks just from this skill, especially if you're hitting multiple enemies. And you get 1 stack of that effect when you apply any condition to the enemies. And so again, you will get 30 stacks from that effect very easily and very often in the fight. And from this trait, for every Carapace stack you will have, it will give you 0.5% of life force whenever you go to Shroud. So that means if you were, for example, at the middle of the fight or something and you go to Reaper Shroud, you will definitely have a lot of Carapace stacks, and this will give you a big boost to your Reaper Shroud life force to stay longer in Reaper Shroud. Deadly Strength will make our Carapace even more effective because it will increase our power and condition damage by 10 per stack. So again, when we have 30 stacks, that will increase our power by 300, which is again very significant. And don't forget that we're using Rise as one of our utility skills, which will summon minions that will help tank the enemies a little for you, and they will also reduce the damage you will take by 33% as long as they are alive. Signet of the Locust is not only good for speed, especially during combat. If you use that skill, especially when you have multiple enemies around you, this will give you a lot of health, and it can easily fill half of your health back up immediately. And then Spectral Grasp will pull enemies towards you, and then applies a chill on them. And remember that chill is very good for this build, it works very well with the traits we explained before. And it will give you a lot of life force, which will enable you to go to Shroud faster and stay in it for longer. Chilled to the Bone will also do a lot of damage, applies even more chill, it will give you some boons, and it will stun the enemies. Now that we understand how our build works and we can see exactly where our damage and sustain are coming from, let's talk about the gear. For the armor, we will have a full set of Berserker armor with Deadeye runes, and then we have Greatsword, our main weapon, with Sigil of Accuracy and Sigil of Strength, and for the second weapon set, we have Sword with the same sigils, which are Accuracy and Strength. For the trinkets, we are also going for a full set of Berserker, and for the relic, we are using Midnight King. You can only use this relic if you have Secrets of the Obscure and you unlocked this relic. But if you don't have the expansion or did not unlock it, your second best option will be Relic of the Brawler. For the food, we will use Plate of Truffle Steak to increase our power and precision, and we will use with them Superior Sharpening Stones to increase our power even more. You can also use Potent Superior Sharpening Stones if you want. They will do the exact same thing, but they will last for 1 hour. I am also using a tier 10 Jade Bot Core, so this will increase my health a little bit more. But of course you don't have to get a tier 10 Jade Bot Core, even if you just have a tier 1 that will work just fine. Now I will show you how to buy each component from the easiest and cheapest sources. On the trading post, you can find this level 80 exotic set that is very cheap and it will give you the same stats as Berserker. And as you can see on the screen, the difference in stats between exotic and ascended or legendary is not that much at all. And especially in open world, you will not even feel the difference, so don't feel bad if you only have exotic. And as you can see from the prices, a full set will be very cheap. For the accessories, amulets and rings, if you have ascended or legendary, that will be great. But if you don't, then you need to buy exotic from the trading post or craft them yourself. And they will be called Ruby on the trading post, and they will include the jewel in them, so you don't need to buy any extra jewels. For the rings, you need to buy 2 Ruby Orichalcum ring. For the amulet, buy the Ruby Orichalcum amulet. Do not buy the Ruby Benedant, it's much more expensive for no reason. And the accessories, you will need to buy 2 Ruby Orichalcum earrings. For the backpack, you can buy any of the Lucky Lantern backpacks, which will be stat selectable, but as you can see, they're not exactly cheap. If you want to save on the cost, you can buy the rare accessories, which will also give you the Berserker stats, and they're also called Ruby. You can also do the same with the backpack, and in our case, if you will buy a rare one, you will buy a Cavalier Spine Guard. Just make sure you add a jewel to your backpack, whether it will be exotic or a rare one. For the Great Sword, the cheapest one you can buy on the trading post is the Ebon Blade. And for the swords, you can buy 2 of this weapon. For the Deadeye runes, they are cheap to buy from the trading post, and you will save a lot of gold by buying them and not crafting them. And then we need 2 Superior Sigils of Accuracy, because we will use 1 on the Great Sword and 1 on the sword. As for the superior sigil of strength, as you can see, it's not exactly cheap on the trading post, and you will need to buy 2 of them. If you have a weaponsmith that is at least level 400, you can craft it and save a little bit of gold, but not that much. If this was too expensive and you can't afford it, you can buy the major sigil of strength instead, which will still do a good job. It will give you 7 seconds of might every 1 second instead of 10 from the superior version. As for Relic of the Midnight, as I said, you can only buy it if you have Secrets of the Obscure and you already unlocked it. You can buy it from the Relic vendor in the Wizard's Tower, which can be found a little east of the spawn waypoint in the map, and you will find him standing in front of a set of stairs. And for World vs. World players, don't forget that you can buy any Secrets of the Obscure relic from the Notary vendor, which you can find in any of the Borderlands. However, you must have unlocked it at least once by doing the story or by finishing Secrets of the Obscure reward track, getting the final chest, and when you open it, you will find the relics all the way down. Just unlock the relic at least one time and then it will be permanently unlocked from the vendor and you can buy it anytime. Or if you can't buy that relic at all, then your second best option is Relic of the Brawler. But unfortunately, all the relics on the trading post are a little bit more expensive. Even if you will craft them yourself, you will not save a ton of gold. You will still pay a decent amount. I have plenty of guides that shows you how to gear up any character from scratch with exotic and ascended set delectable gear. And all of this from sources that are very easy and very cheap. I will leave it in the description alongside with other guides that you will find very helpful for gearing up. Now I will show you how to use the build, and you will find it very easy and pretty straightforward to use. Reaper Shroud is your main source of damage and sustain, so you always want to go to Reaper Shroud whenever it is available. The first thing you will do is use your skill number 5. This is going to do a very decent amount of damage and it will stun the enemies. But more important, it will also apply chill and it will give you an ice field. And if you use your skill number 4 in that ice field, you will do chilling bolts that will chill the enemies even more. And remember, your traits in the Reaper trait line works together very well with chill and they will help you a lot with the damage and sustain. And then you will use your skill number 3 only once, which will reduce the damage by 66% and give you 3 stacks of stability. You also want to use your skill number 2 after you use your skill number 5 in the ice field, because this will give you Frost Aura, which will chill the enemies even more and it will reduce the damage you take by 10%. So basically, go to your Reaper Shroud and use all of your skills, including skill number 3, but use it only once. If you have multiple enemies surrounding you, then you want to start with Spectral Grasp. This will pull the enemies towards you and it will chill them, which we just explained how important it is to the build. And it will also give you a big chunk of life force and it will scale with the number of enemies around you. And so this skill alone can fill your bar even if you are very low on life force if you are fighting multiple enemies. And then you will use Chill to the Bone to apply a very decent damage, but also stun the enemies, apply even more chill, give yourself might, fury, and quickness, and then you will also give stability. And then you will use Rise to summon some minions to help you in the fight, and the more enemies there are, the more minions that will be spawned, and remember that those minions will take some of the damage away from you. As I explained before, Signet of the Locust is not only good for the extra speed in combat, it's also very good because it will siphon a lot of heals from enemies. And again, especially if you are surrounded by a lot of enemies, if you found yourself low on health, just use Signet of the Locust in the middle of them and this will give you a significant amount of heals. And of course, your heal you can use anytime you want. So if the fight is easy and you are up against a couple of mobs that are very easy to kill, just go to your Reaper Shroud and use your skills quickly. However, if you have a lot of mobs surrounding you, Spectral Grasp, Chill to the Bone, Rise, and then you go to Reaper Shroud and use all of your skills. You will only use your Greatsword skills if your Reaper Shroud was on cooldown. Otherwise, you will go to Reaper Shroud whenever it is ready. And on your Greatsword, same thing, just use all of your skills. 5 to pull the enemies towards you, and this will give you a lot of life force and chill the enemies as well. And then 4, which will do a lot of damage and it pulses. It will also blind the enemies, cripple them, and remove any wounds they will potentially have. And then skill 3, which will apply a lot of vulnerability and do a decent damage. It will also give you some life force. And Gravedigger, which will do significant amount of damage. And if you use it on enemies that are below 50%, you can literally spam it. Even the auto attack itself is not bad at all. It will give you life force at the last chain of the auto attack and it will chill the enemies. And also, if you landed that last chain of the auto attack on an enemy, it will also auto recharge a Gravedigger and you can use it right away. Greatsword is your main weapon when you are outside of Shroud. Sword is your secondary weapon when you need range. Or if you have a champion or something that you want to kite, you can just keep kiting them while using the range from your sword. The only skill you want to be careful not to use is skill number 5, because this will fear the enemies away from you. And again, this is not necessarily something good you want to do, because you always want to pull the enemies towards you just to cleave them up quickly. Unless, of course, you want to fear them on purpose, because maybe you're under a lot of pressure and you want to move them away, or if you want to just break bar or something. But the important thing to keep in mind with all of your sword skills is that each one of them can be used twice, and the second skill is always very good. But when you use it, this will sacrifice some of the health, so keep that in mind and be careful which skills you will use at what time. So for example, if I use my skill 2 now and use it again, I sacrifice some of the health to gain a little bit more damage and to also gain some might. Now the amount of health we lost here may not seem like that much at all, but in a hard fight, you may not want to lose any kind of health because you will go down because of it. Or maybe if you are fighting a hard champion and you try to kite, again, losing any amount of health can be a problem, so be very careful which skills you can use. Also keep in mind the skill number 3, boost activations, will give you a decent amount of heals. And skill 4, the first use from it, is also going to give you a decent amount of heals. Now let's talk about some options if you struggle to stay alive and you want to be a little bit more tanky. The first change we can do is remove Chill to the Bone and use Flesh Golem instead. This will help tank and aggro some enemies away from you. If you need it more, remove Spectral Grasp and you can put another minion. You can put Summon Bone Fiend. Don't switch Rise off because this will be very good and it will also summon a lot of minions to help you. And I don't recommend removing Signet of the Locust either because it's also very good for heals. But if you want, you can remove it and you can use Shadow Fiend instead. If you will end up using more minions, then what you want to do here is use Flesh of the Master, which will give you some carapace based on your minions, and it will also increase their health. And again, if you are using minions and you found yourself struggling with conditions, then you can use this trait, which will make the minions take some conditions away from you. Even if you're only using a couple of minions, not all of them, and you found yourself struggling a little bit, those two traits can be very helpful. Another change we can do for sustain in the Reaper line, we can choose Soul Eater, because this will give us some heals based on our damage, which will be a lot. This trait will not give you as much damage as Chilling Victory, but it's not that bad at all, and it will still increase the damage by 10% while healing you at the same time, so it's not a huge loss. Now I will leave you with some footage on how this build will perform on the Golem, as a lot of you requested on my previous builds, and then I will also show you some footage on how this build will function in open world in action. Keep in mind that in the open world footage, I will assume you have the defensive and offensive protocol buffs because they are extremely easy to get now. In the Wizard's Tower map, west of the spawn waypoint, you will see a charging station which will enable you to refill your battery charges immediately. And then you can just come interact with the protocols here, which are now much faster and easier to use. And when you are done getting all 4 charges from one of the buffs, this will stay with you for 3 hours, which is a lot. And then you can come back here to the charging station, refill your battery charges and go for the second buff. If you found this guide helpful and you liked the build, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel to see more build guides in the future. And if you tried it yourself, it will be great if you can give us some feedback in the comments. Thank you very much for watching and I will see you in the next guide.